This video is going to deal with homework problems 22 and 23, where we're going to find variances and standard deviations with Statcrunch. And I know these two problems have given students a lot of problems because the way you find a population variance and standard deviation and the way you find a sample variance and standard deviation is slightly different. We'll find with samples, there's an adjustment made, whereas with the population variance, you want the unadjusted. So when you come across these problems in the homework, they probably look the same, but they're not. The adjustment is made in the formula for finding sample variances and standard deviations because of the greater variability present in samples as opposed to populations. Now, in Statcrunch, the default selection makes the adjustment every time. So the standard deviation that you get, like when we looked at question 14 and we pulled the summary stats, was with the adjustment made for a sample, because that's usually what we work with. We make inferences from samples to populations, and that's foundational to inferential statistics. We're going to be discussing more in our next section, exploring probability. So when we're working with population data, and recall that a population includes all the data points or elements of a data set, this adjustment is not necessary. So we're going to use the Statcrunch stats, summary stats, and select the unadjusted variance and the unadjusted standard deviation. We will work through problems 22 and 23 to show this done with Statcrunch. We're going to begin with problem 22, dealing with population data. I did that, said that already. Probably can go ahead and take that out. Why don't we do that? Let's go ahead and get rid of this. So we're going to start with problem 22. I'm going to get rid of this too. The numbers of a regular season wins for 10 football teams in a given season are given below. Determine the range, mean, variance, and standard deviation of the population data set. Well, they've helped us out. They've told us it's a population. What makes it a population? Well, if it's a 10-game season, we're looking at the statistics from all of the games for the season, which means it's a population. But again, they helped us out in the question by telling us that. Now here you'll see my completed answers, and we're going to see how I got those in just a minute. And although the problem tells us this is population, we know it anyway. I just said that. We're going to copy the data into Statcrunch and select the summary stats column. And that's what this looks like down here. Let me go to there. That's what it, sorry, I hope I didn't make you dizzy there. And notice when I pull up summary stats, I put the variable 1 over there like we've already done. See how all this stuff is highlighted in blue? That's the default selections. All right, and if we're doing a sample, that's going to be enough. We're going to see in just a minute. But when I click compute, this is what I get. Well, we see that the mean doesn't change whether it's a population standard deviation. That's calculated the same. And the range is calculated the same. So these two answers right here are the first two parts of the question, so we can use those. But this variance and this standard deviation, the adjustment has been made by default. So we want the unadjusted variance and the unadjusted standard deviation. So if we go down, you'll notice that I can pull up summary stats, still select column 1, but I can come down here in the statistics field, and I can change it, and I can say, okay, tell me what the unadjusted variance and the unadjusted standard deviation is. And I select those two, and it puts it over here. I can hold the shift key down when I do that. So I'm going to show you this in Statcrunch in just a second. And here's I hope that it's not too small for you, but if it isn't, pull this down and you'll be able to look at it. I had to kind of make it small to make everything fit. But we see that we have an unadjusted variance of 17.09 and an adjusted standard deviation of 4.1. So this question is now complete. And if I look up here where I started, you notice I have 13, 7.9, 17.09, and 4.1. So what does this look like in Statcrunch? Let's go ahead and do this part of it. So I've got the question ready to go. And I am going to copy the data into the table. And it's ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do the first part where I just do the summary stats. So I summary stats for a column, and I click compute. Oops, I always forget that. Don't forget to put your columns where the data is in there. Click compute, and we see the same what I got before. We see the mean of 7.9, range of 13, but I know this variance and standard deviation is not the one that I need. So I'm going to hit the options button here and hit edit. And I can come down here, and if I click in here, it takes away the default selections, and I can go down to, I don't want variance, so I don't know why it did that. I want the unadjusted variance and the unadjusted standard deviation. I'm sorry, I should have held the shift key down to do that, because I can select both of them by holding the shift key down. So when I click compute, I now have 4.1 for my standard deviation is the rounded, and 17.9 for the variance. And remember, if I take the square root of 17.09, I'm going to get around 4.1. So remember that relationship. The standard deviation, if I square this number, I'm going to get this number. If I square the standard deviation, I'm going to get the unadjusted variance. But now I have the unadjusted things, and this question is complete. So we're going to leave that. And I'm going to go ahead to question 23, and I'm going to go back to the document. And let's go down now to question 23. That made me dizzy. Moving on to question 23. That was supposed to be 2. No, see, spell check doesn't always work, does it? To question number 23. Since the sample variance and sample standard deviation, oh my word, I must have been in a hurry to get this done. And I spelled it wrong. Perfect. Are found using the summary stats column default settings. The solution patch for this one's going to be much more direct. So again, the age and years of a random sample. Well, they tell me right there in the first sentence, this is a sample. So I want to answer the same questions. And this is what I mean about the questions look alike. But the difference is one's for a population, one's for a sample. But I want to find the same things: the range, the mean, the variance, and the standard deviation. So when I do the default, and I'm going to do this one in Statcrunch as we finish the video here, but I do the same thing. I have my my data loaded into Statcrunch. I go to summary stats. Variable 1 is in the first columns where my data is, and I just click compute, and I get my mean, my variance, my standard deviation, and my range. And since this is a sample, this is enough. I have everything I need to answer the 4 parts to this question, because I need the adjusted variance and the adjusted standard deviation, and that's what the default setting is in Statcrunch. So we have a range of 11, a mean of 17.6, a sample variance of 12.49 rounded to 2 places, and the sample standard deviation 3.5, more typos, rounded to 1 place. This question is complete. So if we're going to look at that in Statcrunch, this is question number 23. I'm going to copy my data. This is much more straightforward than the other one. I'm going to the summary stats columns, click variable 1, click compute, and I'm going to pull this over here, and you see 17.6 is my mean. We see a range of 11 right there. We see the standard deviation rounds to 12.49, and we see 3.5, and so this question is complete. I know this was a part that got a lot of you stuck. I hope this gets you unstuck. Remember, the deadline for this test will be tomorrow. I'll have at least 1 more video coming, maybe 2, and send me your questions. Good luck and be well today.